The story begins in a city that is currently controlled by military forces. A terrible disaster occurs where the residents are infected by a deadly virus that makes most of them decide to flee to another city. However, their efforts are stopped by the soldiers who order the residents to remain in the city. Those who oppose the military's decision will be sent to the isolation camps. The next scene shows a commander named Stone who is torturing the wife of one of his rebellious soldiers. The soldier is called John. Stone finds out that John is helping people to escape from the isolation camp. Stone threatens to kill his wife, Susan, if John still won't tell him about the hiding place of the residents who escaped from the isolation camp. Because John refuses to tell him the truth, Stone decides to kill Susan right in front of John. Three years have passed, yet John still cannot forget his beloved wife. While in hiding, John is secretly practicing self-defense to avenge his wife one day. Then it is told that back then in the past John was one of the members of the Special Forces under Stone's command. The Special Forces have massacred hundreds of residents who were suspected of being infected with a dangerous virus. The truth is this virus was just a diversion of issues Stone made for his personal gain. The citizens had to become victims of his greed. John, who still has a conscience, strongly condemns the heinous actions of his superiors, but John is considered a traitor because of this. According to the test results, John was immune to the virus that hit the city, so the medical team planned to make a vaccine from John's blood. However, John refused and fought them, and in the end, he managed to escape from the camp. John is currently hiding in the forest. The thought of his wife's death still haunts him. He is also still feeling guilty after killing many innocent citizens. When he is mourning his fate, John is surprised by the presence of a wounded woman. John immediately takes the woman into his hut. The next day the woman wakes up. Her name is Maria. In Maria's body, John finds a bullet is still lodged. This bullet was fired by military forces when she tried to escape earlier. John helps Maria remove the bullet. After it is successfully removed, John is surprised to find out that it's not an ordinary bullet. This bullet is a tracking device. Maria passes out after John removes the bullet from his body. John realizes that Maria is being targeted by the Special Forces, and he also sees a special barcode on her wrist. When she wakes up, John tells Maria that she can stay in his cabin for a while, but later after she recovers she has to leave immediately because John doesn't want to get into trouble since he's also the target of the Special Forces. 2 days later, some people from the Special Forces come to his hut and ask him about Maria's whereabouts since the GPS points them to his hut, but John ignores them. They want to search John's hut until John incapacitates them in the end, while Maria herself manages to kill one of them. Now Maria realizes that John is not an ordinary person. She wants to know more about John, but John doesn't want to reveal his identity to her. The news about the deaths of the members of the Special Forces reached the ears of their two superiors, Roy and Lucy. They plan to report it to their commander, who is none other than Stone, the person who killed John's wife at the beginning of the film. Meanwhile, John is busy building a fort in his hiding place. He is pretty sure other members of the Special Forces will come to retaliate. Later in the evening, Maria opens up to John, and she tells him why she is being chased by the Special Forces. Just like John, Maria's DNA is immune to the virus, hence they want to use her. Maria is reluctant to give her DNA because she knows that the military forces would only give the vaccine to certain groups. They will not help poor citizens who are infected by the virus. They will only use the vaccine for their personal gain, so they can take control of the city. Fate brought her to meet John, who has the same condition as her, but the difference is that John has to lose his beloved wife. Maria says that in the past she was a thief and had been imprisoned, but the virus outbreak had killed most of the prisoners, as well as the prison guards. Maria survived because she was immune to the virus. The next day John teaches Maria how to use weapons to defend herself.
I was trained not to kill.
No one is innocent.
Shortly after that, 3 members of the Special Forces come to the forest. John realizes that they are coming. He deliberately gets into the hut to lure them, and when they get close, John quickly shoots them.
Good night.
Unfortunately, Maria is caught by one of them, and he orders John to come out of his hiding. John shoots the man from inside the hut, then he immediately kills him after exiting the hut. Since the 3 of his men still have not returned, the superiors decide to send more people to capture Maria. They still don't realize if the one who is protecting Maria is John, who is a former member of their Special Forces, and who is known as a skillful fighter. Meanwhile, John and Maria are preparing themselves to welcome the next troop's arrival. John takes out a weapon he hasn't used in a long time. John asks Maria to get some water from a lake not far from his hut, but unexpectedly Maria is surrounded by the members of the special forces who just arrived there. Assuming their main target has been captured, Roy immediately reports it to Stone, the commander. Before he manages to finish his report, John suddenly appears and starts firing at them. Once again, Maria is saved by John. Unfortunately, Roy is still alive and immediately reports what has happened to Stone and asks him to send reinforcements. Commander Stone instructs his men not to kill Maria and captures her alive. The dispatched troops finally arrived. Although she is caught once, in the end, Maria manages to kill the members of the special forces. News of the death of his troops reaches Stone's ears. He immediately sends additional troops and instructs them to kill the person who has been helping Maria. These additional troops arrived at John's hut. Gunfights and scuffles break again, but John manages to defeat the special forces because he has prepared a strategy to fend off their attacks, and he is also very familiar with the terrain. On the other hand, the members of the special forces seem to have difficulty attacking until, in the end, they meet the same fate as the previous troops. Dozens of additional troops arrive. This time they find a tunnel near John's hut. They immediately report it to Lucy. Unexpectedly, Maria hides above the tunnel and fires them all until no one is left. The death of his men makes Stone realize that he needs to change his strategy. He plans to lure John into the tunnel. John is checking the situation in the forest when he accidentally meets Roy, who is an old friend of his. A fight breaks out between the two. Roy is not an easy opponent to defeat. John is overwhelmed by his attacks. He falls so many times. Unfortunately, at the same time, Maria is also captured. Returning to John, who isn't really dead, he gets up and wants to find Maria. Meanwhile, Roy takes Maria to the tunnel with the troops. John overhears the instructions from Commander Stone through the comms of the dead troops. He orders them to gather in the tunnel, and without thinking, John heads straight to the tunnel. He doesn't realize if it is a trap set by Stone. John meets Roy again in the tunnel. They fight again. Meanwhile, Stone and his troops are waiting for Roy at the end of the tunnel. Back to John, who is having a hard time with Roy's fighting skills, but John is still able to survive until an exhausted Roy hits him. At one point, John manages to overpower Roy. After successfully killing Roy, John immediately takes Maria with him out of the tunnel. But apparently, the troops have blocked the in and out access. Like it or not, John and Maria have to fight them. Another shootout ensues. John and Maria manage to defeat the special forces, but not long after that, the additional troops arrive. In the end, John throws smoke grenades to block their view. He uses this opportunity to run towards the exit. On his way to escape, John is hit by a shot from Lucy, but he still managed to survive. Then he and Maria enter a room. He orders Maria to hide there until it is deemed safe. He will lure the enemy troops out of the tunnel. Too bad, Stone and his troops are already waiting for him at the end of the tunnel. John has no choice. He has to surrender. Finally, John meets his wife's killer again. Now Stone understands why Maria is so difficult to capture. There is John, who has been helping her. Then Stone asks him where Maria is. Of course, John won't tell him, even though he is being tortured by them into confessing. But Stone can't make John open his mouth. Then John challenges Stone to a one-on-one duel with him. Stone, who feels challenged, happily agrees. In the end, John manages to defeat Stone in front of his men. Stone then orders his men to give him a weapon, but none of them wants to give him a weapon because they are already fed up with their heinous commander. Until Stone forcefully grabs a weapon from one of his men, but unfortunately, Stone himself is shot with the gun he is holding. At the same time, Maria comes out and surrenders. She shows them 2 grenades and threatens to blow herself up if Lucy doesn't let John go. Lucy grants Maria's request, and finally Maria is brought to the headquarters while they leave John in the forest. It turns out that earlier John has given his blood sample to Maria so they can use that as a vaccine. In the end, a vaccine is made from Johann and Maria's blood samples, and the citizens can live peacefully in the city.